extremities, motor and sensory, or you do everything motor and then sensory. So that is what I'm going to do. I think it will be a bit easier. So what are the things that you want to determine from your examination? First, you want to determine whether or not there is a lesion. If there is a lesion, try and characterize the lesion. Okay, okay, let's see first. Characterize the lesion. And what's challenging about the motor and sensory examination is that I'm sure you all remember from anatomy and all that all the muscles, each one will have the nerves, the roots innervating it, C5, C6, C7, C7, C8. You must know which nerve roots innervate which muscle by heart. No exceptions. Okay? And the same goes for the dermatomes. Which nerve roots innervate which part of the skin, also by heart. I know it's difficult, but you need that information for you to determine the third thing, which is where exactly in the central nervous system is that lesion. And the fourth thing you would like to determine after that is, what is that thing causing this lesion in that central nervous system? Inflammation, a nerve root prolapse, and so on. But these are the things that you will study in the clinical years. So we won't discuss that now. For today, it's just how to perform the motor and sensory examination. All clear up to this point? Okay. So, before we carry out the examination, I'm not sure if in the previous sessions they've discussed the things you need to do, ask the patient for permission and what all that. You do all that here as well. And then for inspection, you want to determine whether or not there are any fasciculations or involuntary contractions of certain muscular groups, which can be transient, fasciculations, and tremors. You also want to see whether or not there's any symmetry of the muscle groups, any hypertrophy, or any wasting. Again, these are indicative of various neurological disorders. We won't discuss them in detail. Okay? For those in the clinical years, I'm sure you've heard the term hypertrophy and pseudo-hypertrophy. How you want to distinguish it on clinical examination is a bit difficult. Based on what I've read, ultrasound only. But that's why for now your job is just to detect whether or not there is any hypertrophy or enlargement of any muscular groups or any wasting. So now, we first want to assess tone. Tone means increased resistance to your movement. So I'll start taking his hand, rotate the wrist, and then flex at the elbow joint, and can assess at the shoulder joint as well. Now, it's not you simply mind goyang here. No. Actually, what you're supposed to do is, as you assess it, you increase the velocity. And then you see, is there any increased resistance when you increase the velocity as well? So and then faster, faster, faster. Here you want to see whether there's increased tone, clasp nut rigidity, which is increased resistance at the beginning, and then only the movement goes as normal. Cogwheel rigidity, and lat pipe rigidity, where the tonus or the tone of the muscle is increased throughout the movement. Okay? Again, you will study what diseases in which these signs are present, or you can go back home and read up about it as well. So you can you do this for one side, and then you do it for the other side as well. I won't repeat it. Next, you want to assess power. Power, according to the Medical Research Council, there are a few grades of power. This one also you need to know by heart. So they are graded from 0 to 5. 0 to 5. 5 is the highest, it means normal power. 4 is subdivided into 4 plus, 4, and 4 minus. 4 plus is sub-maximal power against resistance. 4 alone is moderate power against resistance. 4 minus is minimal power against resistance. What all this means is that there is decreased power, but the patient still has the strength to resist your movements. Later when I demonstrate, you'll understand better. 3 means he can move against gravity, but not against resistance. That means, for example, if I ask the patient to flex his elbow, he will be able to raise it throughout the whole range of movement. But he can, if I were to push like this, he does not have the power to resist me. If I take out my hand, no problem. Grade 2, he can only do that if gravity is removed. If in 3 he can do this, for 2 he cannot. He needs to lie down and then only can move the hand a little bit. But he can still move. Grade 1, there's only a flicker of movement. Like, I'm not sure if you all remember physiology when you all do the experiments on the katak and all that. Something like that. 0, totally no movement. All clear up to this point? Okay, so now we want to assess the power of muscle groups of the upper extremities. For this, I'd like to ask Encik Abang, could you sit up please? Encik Abang. Okay lah, so please, first we'll assess the movement at the shoulder joint. So please, can you do your arms like this? Some even say, Encik, tolong buat tengah macam ayam. No, really. Yeah, easy to remember also. And Encik, bila saya tolak, Encik cuba tahan apa yang buat, okay? Very strong. So, again, you must remember what muscles perform this action of shoulder abduction and adduction. What are the nerve roots which innervate them? So, in this case, it's the deltoid and the musculus supraspinatus, latissimus dorsi, and pectoralis major. And then again, remember their nerve roots. For the biceps, Encik tolong buat tangan macam ni. Okay, cuba tahan apa yang I buat. Kalau I tarik, Encik tahan. Okay, and then like this. So flexion, what muscles?
Biceps and brachialis.
Biceps and brachialis. Extension?
Triceps.
Okay, bonus question for you all. Let's say I want to ask the patient to do like this and say, okay, tarik. Is that correct or not?
Huh?
This is what I asked Abang to do earlier. Tahan. Let's say I were to ask him to, I take his hand, okay, and then do like this. Correct or not?
No.
Why?
Because the biceps
Because biceps what?
doesn't involve much.
How so?
It will involve both bicep and tricep, right?
Something like that. Any second years here or not?
You involve another muscle.
Correct.
Correct.
Correct. 50%, but partly correct. No second years here. Okay lah. Option
Second year.
Okay. So where is the biceps attached to? If you remember. Remember the muscles origin attachment? Biceps is attached to the radius. And remember what's special about the radius as opposed to the ulna? When you do pronation, the radius moves. So that is why when you do this, you palpate your hand and you do this. When you do this, the biceps switches off. Therefore, you cannot assess the biceps anymore. And as what our friend said, you'll be assessing a different muscle already, not the biceps. So remember, it's not you tengok buat macam ayam, buat macam ni and all that, but the position of the extremities are also important. So you try to follow them as accurately as possible. Okay. So next, we should test movement at the wrist. So okay, Encik cuba buat macam ni. Okay, I cuba tolak, Encik cuba tahan. Okay. Again, saya cuba tolak, Encik cuba tahan. Okay. Next, we also want to assess, we have assessed wrist flexion and extension. Now we want to assess the fingers. Again, flexion and extension first. Encik tolong buat jadi macam ni. Saya tolak, Encik cuba tahan. Some say you should assess at the metacarpophalangeal joints. However, some say you should assess here. So, yeah, controversial. Anyway, assess flexion and extension at the same place. And then you also want to assess abduction and adduction of the fingers. So which of the interosseous muscles are responsible for abduction and which ones are responsible for adduction? Teaching word mnemonic: pads and dabs. PAD, pads, and dabs. Pads, palmar adductors. So that means the palmar interosseous muscles are the adductors. Dabs, dorsal abductors.